بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على رسول الله سيدنا محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. We have covered quite a bit in the last few days with regards to fiqh and the formulation of fiqh and differences of opinion and the role of ego in difference of opinion, where difference of opinion is allowed, where it's not allowed, and how it's a blessing for the ummah. And we've discussed yesterday the hukum shar'i. What does fard mean? What does mubah mean? What does mandub mean? And if you missed those, you can go back to those lectures and revisit them and watch them and understand them, and you can learn what they are, inshallah. Today we're going to start fiqh of fasting. Fiqh of fasting is not that complicated. It's very simple. Let's see how much we get through today. First of all, with regards to fasting, like we mentioned in the first lecture, fasting, the Arabic word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses for fasting is siyam. Siyam means to stay away from something, prevent yourself from something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. I make a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to stay away from speaking. Maryam alayhi salam says in the Quran, staying away from something is called sawm. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a fard. There's different types of fasting. There's fasting that is fard. There's fasting that is non-fard. And then there's fasting that is prohibited. You're not allowed to fast during specific days. So there are different types of fasts we're going to go through today, inshallah. There's three types of fasts that are fard, that are obligatory on the Muslim. And when we say obligatory on the Muslim, we're talking about a Muslim that is baligh, a Muslim that is accountable. Mukallaf is the Arabic word, which means that a person who is mentally sane and a person who has reached the age of puberty. That's the two things that are required for the hukum shar'i to apply on a person. If any one of them is missing, the hukum shar'i will not apply to that person. Make sense? So when a person reaches the age of puberty and he is mentally sane, then the hukum shar'i applies to him of the fard of fasting. The first obligation, the fasting that's obligatory, the first one is obvious, the one that we're doing right now, the month of Ramadan. Is fard for everyone to fast 30 days. And this fard is qat'i. There is no difference of opinion on this. And if someone believes that it's not fard, it will take them out of the fold of Islam. This is a qat'i fard. There's other types of fasts that are fard also. A fast, for example, a fast of penalty is called siyam kaffara. There's different types of penalties in Islam. For example, you're not allowed to have physical relations when you're fasting in the month of Ramadan. If you do, the penalty of that could be fasting, could be paying fidya, could be whatever the case is. That penalty, if it is a fast, that becomes fard on you also. Does that make sense? So it's not just the fard of Ramadan that's fard. There is fasting of kafara, is called, penalties, different types of penalties. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us different types of penalties. If you miss the fast of Ramadan, for example, the penalty is fasting for 2 months consecutively. Not for everyone, for those who can do it. For those who can't do it, they should feed a poor person. And this fasting is fard. The 2 months of a penalty fast is also fard. Do you understand? It's called siyam kaffara. And there's different types. There's various types of siyam kaffara. We don't have time to go into all of them. But the penalty that is a fast is also an obligatory fast. That's all you have to know. Okay? For anything in Islam, there'll be a penalty. If the penalty turns out to be a fast, that fast becomes obligatory. There's a third type of fast that's also obligatory, which is what Maryam alayhi salam did in the Quran, where she made a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She said, Ya Allah, if this happens, I will fast. If you make a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you're going to fast, that fast also becomes fard on you. You have to fast that fast. Do you understand? So there's 3 types of obligatory fastings. You can you can categorize into multiple categories, but I'm trying to be as general as possible. There's a siyam of Ramadan, the fasting of Ramadan, which is fard. There's the fasting of penalty. A penalty that is a fast, that's also fard. And there's various types of that. Penalty for killing someone unintentionally, penalty for breaching the laws of the physical relationship, the fast that you're not supposed to do, penalties fast. So that fast, the penalty of a fast is obligatory. Fast of Ramadan, penalty being a fast. And the fast of making a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you make a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is fard. There is also voluntary type of fasts where you don't get sin if you don't do it, but you get reward if you do that. There's many of that. The first one is the fasting of Dawood alayhi salam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said this is the best type of fast. You fast one day and you eat one day. And you fast one day and you eat one day. There's the fasting of the 6 days of Shawwal that follows right after Ramadan. So Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said the one who fasts all 30 of Ramadan and the 6th of Shawwal is as if he's fasted the whole year. There's the fasting of Dhul Hijjah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah and the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. And that's Yawm Arafah on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah and Eid al-Adha on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. The fast of the 9th is Yawm Arafah specifically, is voluntary. The fast of Muharram, the 10th of Muharram, the 9th of Muharram, 11th of Muharram, because you're not supposed to fast only one day, you're supposed to bring it together, right? 9, 10 or 10, 11 to make yourself Muslims separate from the Bani Israel who used to fast because of Musa alayhi salam being saved from Fir'aun. So that fast of Muharram, which is 9, 10 or 10, 11 is also voluntary. The fast of Sha'ban, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to fast the most in the month of Sha'ban. That's voluntary fast Rasulullah used to do. Shahrullah al-Muharram, the fast of the month of Muharram. Rasulullah used to fast also a lot in the month of Muharram, but the most in the month of Sha'ban, which is just before Ramadan. Rasulullah also used to fast Mondays and Thursdays. That's also a recommended fast. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam also used to fast on the 13th and the 14th and the 15th of every month. These are called Ayyam al-Bid, the white days. 13th, 14th, 15th of the month. As you can see, the majority of the year there's different types of fasts that are recommended for the Muslim who wants to take it step up a notch, who's not satisfied with the bare bones minimum, he wants to put in a little bit extra. Islam prescribed fasting. Rasulullah ﷺ acted upon it, so it's recommended for us to take it step up a notch so we can constrain our desires and restrict our desires, because fasting is supposed to do that. And I'm going to remind you again, because we already talked about this in the first halaqah and the first lecture, but I will remind you again that fasting, all of these fastings, the nawafil, the extra fast, like let's not say nawafil, the extra fast. Nafil is a very broad term. Anything other than fard can be nafil, or the specific nafil also. Let's not get into the details, just extra fast. All these extra fasts that we have, they're meant to curb your desires, because if you remember all the hadith about fasting, fasting is a shield. Fasting intercedes for you on the day of judgment until you go to Jannah. Fasting in the month of Ramadan expiates all your previous sins, like you were born to your mother on the first day. All of these only apply to the person who fasts with his stomach plus his desires. When fasting means restraining, staying away. So all of these only apply to the person who stays away from food and water and stays away from his desires. If you don't do that, your fast is not accepted. You're not getting the perks of the fast. So all of these fasts are designed for you, if you fasted the correct way, to keep you at bay from your desires, to keep you on top of your game. If you remember, in the battle of Ain Jalut, Ain Jalut, or the Battle of Hittin, I believe. It was Khalid bin Walid against the Roman Empire. Khalid bin Walid took an army to the Persians before he took it to the Romans. The army was about 150,000 strong of the Persians, and the Muslims defeated them. In the same week, they pulled off a miracle where they took an entire army through the Saharan desert up north to fight the Romans, because the Muslims were losing against the Romans. Muslims asked for reinforcements. Khalid bin Walid went up north, crossing the Saharan desert in a sense of urgency. If you know, one of the main reasons Hitler lost in World War I when he went into Russia too deep was because his army wasn't capable of crossing that plain. It was too far from home. It was too hard a walk. It was too cold a weather. Talk about crossing a desert in record time. Khalid bin Walid took the entire army of Muslims, crossed the desert, went to the Romans, and an army of 30,000 defeated an army of 200,000 of Romans. And just last week they defeated the Persians. So the Romans, when they were losing, at the brink of losing, they couldn't figure out what is the secret formula of Muslims. So what the general did of the Romans, he sent a spy during the night time, because during the day they're fighting. Sunset to sunset, sunrise to sunset is the fight. Sunset to sunrise is rest. So when they're resting, he sent a spy to check it out. What are they drinking as magical potion? Do they have special weapons? What are they doing? Witchcraft? Why are they? Who are these people? So he sends a spy, and the spy goes and he comes back and he says, you will never defeat these people. Why? Because they're warriors by day and they're monks by night. When I went into that camp, no one was sleeping. It was buzzing with some sort of a noise, and there was lights in the tent. The Sahaba were trained to have super high levels of taqwa. Even from the first day, forget Khalid bin Walid in like 15, 20 Hijri. Forget that. 40 years before that, 40, 50 years before that, 15, 20 Hijri, Rasul passed away in 10 Hijri. Before he migrated, 20 years he was in Mecca. So 40 years before that, 40 years. From the first day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Sahaba obligates Qiyamul Layl for at least 1/3 of the night. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. From the first day Sahaba became Muslim in Mecca, the obligation was for them to pray 1/3 of the night. Either 1/3 or half or more than half, but no less than 1/3 of the night. Meaning at least 3 to 4 hours of Qiyamul Layl every single night they had to pray. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا نِصْفَهُ أَوْ انْقُصْ مِنْهُ قَلِيلًا أَوْ زِدْ عَلَيْهِ وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. The Sahaba were trained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again and again through Qiyamul Layl in day one. On day one, Muzammil was like, when I say day one, I don't mean day one, I mean like in the early ages, probably first week, first month, something like that. We don't never know the precise timings. You have to understand the concept. The Sahaba were taught to let go of their desires, let go of their love of this dunya. Since day one, Qiyamul Layl. They migrated to Medina, fasting was prescribed. And as you can see, there's so many voluntary fasts. You can see the fast of, we already talked about like at least 7 to 9 different types of voluntary fast. Most of the day you're fasting. In the night you're supposed to pray Qiyamul Layl. The Muslim is not a person who is jahala, who is just loose with his desires. The one that's loose with his desires is an animal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to fast the way we're supposed to fast. Allahumma ameen ya rabbal alameen. As we can see, we talked about different types of fast that exist. We talked about the fast that is fard. We talked about the fast that is nafil, that is extra. The fard are of 3 types: the fast of Ramadan, the fast of penalty, and the fast of when you make a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to fulfill. That's a fard fast. And the extra fast, there are loads of them. We talked about the fasting of Dawood. We talked about the 6th of Shawwal. We talked about Muharram, the 10th. We talked about Ashura, which is Muharram. We talked about Sha'ban, the fasting of Sha'ban. We talked about the fasting of Monday and Thursday. We talked about the fasting of 13th, 14th, 15th of every month, etc., etc. The last one I want to talk about are the prohibited fasts, where you're not allowed to fast those. The prohibited fasts. When are you not allowed to fast? Okay? This is a very important topic, this one. It's haram for you to fast on Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. There's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he said, in a hadith, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن صيام يومين يوم الفطر ويوم النحر. He forbade fasting on the day of Eid, both of them, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. Rasul Sallallahu also prohibited fasting one day before the day of Ramadan, before Ramadan starts. Rasul Sallallahu said, لا تقدموا رمضان بصوم يوم ولا يومين. Do not fast the day before or 2 days before the month of Ramadan unless it's in a habit for you, and the habit kind of, you have a habit of fasting on a specific day and that falls on that day, then you're allowed to fast. But in general, it's haram for a person to fast a day before the month of Ramadan or 2 days, just to differentiate from Sha'ban to Ramadan, because in the month of Sha'ban, the practice of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is to fast as much as possible. It's haram for a woman to fast without the permission of her husband. Because when you're fasting, you're not allowed to have physical relationships. So it's haram for the woman to fast without the permission of her husband. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا يحل للمرأة أن تصوم وزوجها شاهد إلا بإذنه. It's not halal for a woman to fast while his husband doesn't give him permission, essentially. It's haram to fast on Ayyam al-Tashriq, which is the 11th, 12th, 13th of Dhul Hijjah. The 9th of Dhul Hijjah is Arafah. The 10th of Dhul Hijjah is Eid. And the 11th, 12th, 13th of Dhul Hijjah are Yawm al-Tashriq, Ayyam al-Tashriq. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about these, Ayyam al-Tashriq, Ayyamu aklin wa shurb, is the days of eating and drinking. And wa dhikrullahi ta'ala azza wa jalla, it's haram to fast on these 3 days, except for the person who's on Hajj and he fails for a sacrifice. That's for Hujjaj, that's a different story. It's haram to fast by singling out Friday. You can't fast only on Friday, because Friday is a Eid of the believers. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, Eid al-Mu'mineen. So it takes the hukum of Eid, which is you can't fast on Friday by itself if you single it out. But if you're making up a fast or something like that, again, in general it's haram, but if it falls into your habit, you have a habit of fasting, let's say, every weekend, which is Friday, Saturday, Sunday or something, and Friday ends up coming on that, or you couple Friday with Saturday or Friday with Thursday, then it's allowed. But if you single out Friday only, just because it's Friday for some reason, and it's not your habit, and you're not pairing it with anything, it's haram for you to do that. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا تخضوا ليلة الجمعة بقيام من بين الليالي. Do not single out Friday night, which is Thursday night, Friday morning, that night, for قيام الليل. ولا تخضوا يوم الجمعة بصيام من بين الأيام. And do not fast on the day of Friday and single it out only for that day to fast on that day. إلا أن يكون في صوم يصومه أحدكم. Except for when you have a habit, okay? It's haram to fast in the second half of Sha'ban if you don't have a habit. The second half of Sha'ban, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, إذا انتصف شعبان فلا تصوموا. When the second half of Sha'ban comes, do not fast. Again, to differentiate between Ramadan and Sha'ban. Again, if you don't have a habit. It's haram to fast on the day of Arafah if you're in the grounds of Arafah. Make sense? Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, نهى عن صوم يوم عرفة بعرفة. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam forbade fasting on the day of Arafah in Arafah. Make sense? It's haram to fast perpetually, every day of your life until you die. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, لا صام من صام الأبد. There's no fast for the one who fasts every single day. If you want to do that, the best you can do is fast one day, eat one day. Fast one day, eat one day. That's called Siyam Dawood. Fast of Dawood alayhi salam, and that's the fasting of Dawud alayhi salam. I didn't see the time, subhanAllah. I think it's iftar time right now. We'll make dua bidna ta'ala azza wa jal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding. If you missed anything, you can go watch the recording, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلالك ولعظيم سلطانك اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع المتقين والأبرار اللهم تقبل صيامنا وقيامنا وركوعنا وسجودنا يا رب العالمين اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا وقلوب المسلمين اللهم اجعل القرآن لنا في الدنيا قرينا وفي القبر مؤنسا وعلى الصراط نورا وفي الجنة رفيقا ومن النار سترا وحجابا اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من عذاب القبر ومن عذاب النار اللهم لا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا اللهم انصر إخواننا المظلومين في كل مكان يا الله اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.